So I'm Mariah Williams. I'm the Ohio Education and Outreach Coordinator. I'm specifically working right now on a project involving Senate Bill 61, which I will drop a link to in the chat. This Senate bill, I welcome you to read over it for yourself, look into what is in the verbiage of it, and see how it applies to HOAs and how it would help homeowners to have a little bit of clarification on what their homeowners association needs to be permitting. But we try to include that each time, so it's nice and easy to find. It also shows on there who our two sponsoring senators are, so you're always welcome to contact them and their offices to get some more information, to give them input about how you're feeling about that Senate bill, and if you'd like them to be working on, passing it and having meetings and everything for it. So tonight we have a really nice variety of folks here on our panel. So I'm just going to introduce them to you, and then we'll let each one of them have a minute or so to, give some introductions to themselves. So we have Michael, who is an HOA resident, who was able to go solar within his HOA. And he's going to talk about that process with us. We have May, who is on an HOA board. Now, please don't hold anything your HOA might be doing to you against her. She's just here letting us know, what the process is like if you wanted to run and be a board member, or if you wanted to, look into getting more involved, maybe with your HOA board, and to talk to us about how her HOA board handles things like applications for fences or solar, and that way you get an idea of what you might be looking forward to. We have Jake with us. He is an installer with Solar is Freedom, so one of our companies here in Ohio. He's going to talk to us about what they do with HOAs, and even for those homeowners who aren't in one. We have Catherine with us. She is a realtor and has some training and is a solar consultant as well. And she's going to talk to us about, different homes that she knows of with solar, and how, she goes through that process with homeowners who are purchasing a home, and finding out that they are going to be in an HOA, and that disclosure process. And she's also got some really nice environmental sustainability reports that she's going to share with us. And then we have Elizabeth, who is the Environmental Sustainability Advisor for the city of Bexley. She's on that committee, and she's going to talk to us about some of their different programs, and how, cities sometimes get involved with permits and everything else that you might need for solar and going green. So we'll let each one of them, give us a little bit more information, and then we'll jump into some questions that we've received, and let you guys open the floor to some additional questions. But we'll get started with Michael. You want to tell us a little bit about your solar story?
Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this evening in this panel. So as Mariah mentioned, my name is Michael Shaw. I live in Powell, which is on the outskirts of Columbus. I live in a typical suburban HOA neighborhood. Most of the homes were built in the late 90s, so they're about 20 to 25 years old. And that's how old our HOA covenants are, which at the time they were written did not mention anything about solar. So when my wife and I started looking into solar panels for our home several years ago, there were obviously 0 homes in the HOA with solar. I informally talked to the HOA board and was told that they probably wouldn't allow solar, but that I could go ahead and submit a proposal if I wanted to. So I wasn't ready to take no for an answer. So did a lot of research, got a few bids, tried to come up with a proposal that was as aesthetically pleasing as possible. And after considerable time and effort trying to get things just right, my wife and I chose an installer, came up with a proposal that we thought had a decent chance of getting approved. The installer and I both presented our plan to the board at the annual homeowners meeting, along with kind of a general discussion of solar, went over property values, resale, the effect of solar on those, along with our specific plan. Lo and behold, our plan was rejected. The reasons we were given were lack of uniformity with the required roof shingle colors and just overall aesthetics. So at that point, our only recourse was to try to change the HOA covenants. But to do that, it was going to take coming up with a set of solar guidelines, much back and forth with an HOA attorney, and most importantly for our neighborhood, we had to get 75% of the homes in the neighborhood to sign a petition. Our neighborhood has 182 homes, so that's about 137 homes that we needed signatures on a petition for to change anything in the covenants. So quite a daunting task, but at that point we'd invested a lot of time and energy into the process already. So my wife and I decided to forge ahead after many months of drafting solar guidelines, talking with the attorney, putting a petition together and going door to door to talk to neighbors and get signatures. We got our 75%, actually much more than that. And actually we're able to amend the deed restrictions and include guidelines for solar. So we ultimately got our solar panels, and since then 2 other homes in the HOA have installed solar as well, which to me was the biggest win in all of this, just being able to open up solar to others in the neighborhood. So I tell you that story just to kind of, I think it illustrates my view about solar and HOAs. And my view, it was a very unnecessarily arduous task to get solar, and I don't feel like anybody should have to go through what we went through. So I'm here to help, and whatever I can do to make it easier for others, I'm definitely here to advocate for. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Michael. We really appreciate it. Now we'll jump and we'll speak to May for a minute and let her tell us about how she has become, involved with her HOA board.
Hi, thanks for having me. I live about 20 miles southwest of Cleveland in a suburb. I've now lived within the same master association since 1970, so 51 years. And I've been in this particular sub-association for 33 years. I've got Michael beat. Our documents were written in 1979 and 1980. So there is absolutely no mention whatsoever of solar. In 2006, I was asked to fill in as secretary for the current secretary who was moving. And then lucky me, in 2007, I was asked to fill in as treasurer. So I have now been treasurer for 14 years, I think it is. Couple of years ago, we were approached by one member that asked if she could have solar, but she has since moved away. So there's been, no further questions or discussion or anything about it at this point. We do have quite a few elderly people that live here, although we are not a 55 and older community. Also want to mention within our master association, there's over 500 houses, cluster houses, condominiums, and within my particular sub-association, we have 43 houses. So, and we basically, if anybody wanted to make any changes, we're basically in charge of making the decisions. It doesn't need to go to the master association at all. So that's about all I have for this point.
Well, thanks for that, May. Just definitely a different layout than I think some of us are used to, with you guys having 2 associations that cover your stuff. Because I know even in our complex that has a little over 800 houses, it all falls under one, which makes it very interesting if we're having meetings or votes or anything. So next up, we have Jake, who's going to talk to us a little bit about his perspective on this.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me here. And Michael, I got to say kudos to you. That's awesome that you actually went out and got the sign off from over 3/4 of your neighborhood. So that's awesome to hear. But yeah, so I'm with Solar is Freedom. We're a local solar installer. Our headquarters is in Cincinnati. We have office in Columbus as well, and service all of Northern Ohio as well. And we're a very customer focused company. When it sounds like Michael had a lot of help from his installer as well, which is awesome to hear. So whenever we have homeowner applications and things like that, we always like to get involved to help kind of navigate the waters. Oftentimes they're very treacherous waters. So we like to kind of be hands-on and help out as much as we possibly can. Sometimes we can help get a kind of a pass, and sometimes it ends up in a fail, unfortunately. But we've worked with hundreds of customers with homeowners associations in Ohio. We've seen everything from immediate approval and embracing from HOA boards to getting denied for ridiculous reasons. We had somebody last week who got denied, and the reason was for the denial was because you're not allowed to have radars on your roof. Solar panels obviously are not and do not look like radars, so that's one that we're definitely going to push back on. But yeah, so we've seen a lot of crazy things, and it kind of that experience has helped us navigate the waters with some of our customers as well. One thing that is a kind of a beacon of light, like was stated earlier, is Senate Bill 61, which would eliminate many of the restrictions that HOAs are allowed to impose on homeowners, especially their access to solar. Obviously, I was actually in a meeting this morning with CD Green Tech, who is the largest solar supplier in the country. I was in a meeting with them this morning, and the state of New York just passed a bill that outright denied HOA's ability to prohibit access to homeowners, solar access to homeowners, which is awesome to see other states do that. Really hoping that Ohio passes a similar bill that obviously have a huge impact for the amount of Ohioans that are able to go solar, the clean air that all of us breathe, and obviously local jobs like Solar is Freedom and the many other installers that there are in the state. But until then, we have our best practices for how to work with HOAs, and I think it's important to say it like that you're working with the HOA to get it passed, not against the HOA. And one of the most important things that I've learned, again, from the hundreds of customers that I've worked with, is like was previously stated. I think, Michael, you said it was 25 years that were your HOA restrictions. In May, you said something like 35 years or 40 or something like that. A lot of times if solar's mentioned at all, many times it's not mentioned at all. And if it is mentioned, a lot of times it's based off of technology from decades ago, right? And so a lot of times one of the first things to do is to make sure that the HOA board understands what solar in 2021, what it looks like, and especially what it looks like from a reputable installer who can take care of conduit runs and install specific panels that are more aesthetic and things like that. But I guess I can get more into that if people have other questions, but that was, I'll kind of cut myself off there.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jake. We appreciate it. And we will jump over to Catherine for a little bit of the real estate kind of view on this.
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Hope Cunningham, and I'm both a realtor and a solar energy consultant. About 7 years ago, I went into solar energy, got certified as a designer, and then a couple of years later, as I was doing site assessments on people's homes, the more I went to people's homes, the more I got interested in real estate. And so they are very complementary industries. And I'm very lucky to work in both of them. The two industries don't always agree on this subject. And there is a lot of discussion and a lot of interest around this subject because it's becoming more and more something that consumers are seeking. And the statistics show that consumers are actively seeking out things like energy efficiency, solar, things that anything that lowers a utility bill is certainly seen as valuable. So as a both solar consultant and a real estate agent, I obviously have pretty strong opinions about, solar. And my personal opinion is that I feel like it's counterproductive to do blanket restrictions on solar. I know that there are some, HOAs that have blanket restrictions. I personally feel like that's maybe not in the consumer's best interest, and it may not even be in the neighborhood's best interest to do that. Now, any conversation with an HOA, I think needs to start with what the HOA is concerned about. And one of the resources that I like to use to guide that conversation is the NAR sustainability report. So that's the National Association of Realtors. They actually release a sustainability report every single spring. And Mariah, if you could share that, there's a PDF in the chat. It is a 27-page report, but don't be scared of the length. It has a lot of pie graphs and charts and very easy images and graphics that you can use to start that conversation with your HOA. And a lot of what I see is that there is some fear around property value, and the property value questions are addressed in this report. And what's interesting is if you put 2021's report next to, for instance, 2018's report and compared those numbers, and if you compared those numbers from year to year, what you see is a constant increase in the number of consumers that are willing to pay a premium for energy efficient, properties of any, home, whatever those are, whether it's, a really great HVAC system or insulated windows or solar or geothermal, or it's all of those things. And consumers are more and more not just interested in them, more consumers are actively looking for them. So I think that's a really great resource to point you towards as a conversation starter. Obviously, the National Association of Realtors doesn't have anything invested in what are the outcomes of those statistics, other than to say, what specifically are the consumers looking for? And the answer to that question is not always fluid. Sometimes it depends upon the region that you're in. And this particular report breaks it down into 4 different regions, but I would argue that it funnels even more narrowly down into what neighborhood are you in, So there's no real true blanket answer that really applies to everybody. In order to have a conversation about solar in anybody's home, I need to start with what's the address of the home. So that's a really great resource to start with.
Yes, and I was a recipient of getting that link during our last meeting in July, and I've had a little bit of time to look over it, and it is an excellent, and as she said, a very easy to read resource.
Yep.
Real estate is not my background, and I still was able to glance over the information and find several useful points in there. So
I think it is important to show what is the evidence. I think that's what they're looking for. A lot of HOAs are, what is the evidence? That is the evidence.
Yes, absolutely. They want to know that it is making a difference. They want to know that people don't mind seeing it and that it won't hurt home values. And then the other thing that, we always come up against is, what is it going to look like? So,
right.
Anything that helps with any point of that is a great resource to have in our hands.
I think also, as Michael pointed out, he did not have a whole lot of trouble, circling those wagons, right? You easily got 75% of your neighborhood. And I think that if you were to poll other neighborhoods, you would probably find that also to be true. And so the statistics that are in this report are very much going to reflect, Michael, what your experience has been. I also think that some HOAs have a preconceived notion of what solar looks like. What does it physically look like? No one's ever talked to them about black on black panels. So you know, it's a conversation, I think, that needs to start first with this report and second with this your local solar installer that has those answers.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. Jump back to you for some questions in a few minutes. And right now we're going to hear from Elizabeth.
Let me get my screen shared. Can everyone see that? Great. So I am Elizabeth, and I'm chair of Bexley's Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee, or the ESAC. We love clean and green energy in Bexley. So a few things that I'll just touch on quickly are that we do allow for solar panels. Also, we looked into the PACE program, but we decided to go more with the state's program, although we're waiting for that to really roll out. We are looking also into energy aggregation. That has been put on hold for a little bit, just based on the market rate fluctuations, but we're still actively pursuing that. We do allow front-facing panels in the city, and we also have panels on City Hall and at our service garage. At City Hall, the panels help power our EV chargers, and on the service garage, the electricity that we get there covers most of the electrical use that's used at the garage. And additionally, all city power is renewable energy credits. So we've got a lot of sort of acronyms in Bexley, but I'll just touch on a few things as they relate to solar. Most of the questions that we receive about solar are directed towards the building department, which is not a department that I am a part of, but I'll give as much information as I can and also give some links so you can get in touch with them if necessary. But all of our zoning, architectural, and aesthetic guidelines are subject to approval by our Board of Zoning and Planning and also our architectural review boards. Also, we're not a traditional HOA, but we do have planned unit developments, and each of those has its own zoning and design standards, which are managed by the building department. So in Bexley, we allow panels. Each case is reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and the process for obtaining those is different depending on whether or not the panels are going to be visible from the street. If they are visible from the street, that has to be approved by the ARB, but if it's not visible from the street, that's considered a minor architectural review and is reviewed by the design consultant. And generally, the city is looking for low profile panels. So like we spoke about earlier, dark panels that sort of fit into what the roof already looks like. And more info can be found on the city's website and also our Green Bexley website, and that is our email address as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. While I have you up, we'll jump to one of the questions that was kind of aimed at you that was sent in early. So you had mentioned to me privately that you guys don't have traditional HOAs within Bexley.
Correct.
From what you were saying here, though, that doesn't preclude people from still needing to go through a permit process.
Right.
They can't just jump straight to solar. They have to come talk to somebody. Is that like a multi-page review? And do they need to submit like drawings, renderings of their home and everything?
They would, yeah. And to work with a design consultant and make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing and what the city's looking for.
Well, that sounds like a very reasonable process, though.
We try.
And then if somebody was having trouble with that paperwork, is that something that they could come to, like your sustainability department with and say, can you help me with this? Or is that something that you guys are hands off with altogether?
We're pretty hands off. Those kinds of questions can be directed to the building department, and they're very easy to work with. And they go through this all the time with residents and helping them submit their paperwork.
Well, that's good that they would help somebody through that, though, versus just being like, nope, here's your papers. You're all on your own.
Yep.
And then do you guys have any type, you mentioned PACE in the state programs, but if somebody was like, whenever you're out, I know you guys go to farmers markets and you have a big Earth Day type event, usually when we're permitted to have those.
Yeah.
Do you guys encourage people to go solar? Is that one of your talking points? I know that you have like the curbside composting. in Bexley and some other great sustainability programs. But is solar something you encourage with them?
We do encourage solar, but we don't have an active solar campaign right now. We are also looking to energy aggregation, and hopefully we'll be able to roll that out soon. And that might be a more cost-efficient option for many of our residents.
Absolutely. We love to hear about other cities getting aggregation programs and jumping in on things like that. Okay, so let's see. We had some questions submitted early, and I did let any of our panelists know about them whenever I could. So we'll jump over to Jake. You had covered about that you guys do help HOA applicants, so they don't have to go through that process alone. But one of the questions that we didn't have covered is somebody asked if their HOA only allows panels on the back of the house, but that side of the house, faces north, which isn't so great of an option here in Ohio. Is there anything else they can do if it's just an absolute no-go from the association otherwise?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, because all houses are different. So if that north roof is like a really steep pitch, like some of the houses you see in Bexley, I know we installed a house on Columbia Avenue that had like a really, really steep pitch. If it's on the north side there, it's gonna be really tough for it to receive any sunlight. If it's more of like a flatter pitch, you might still have a chance to get some decent amount of sun. But at the end of the day, north is not ideal by any means. Ideally, you're able to work with your HOA to come up with a better final result than that. Hopefully
I know one of the things that came up in one of our other discussions was somebody had looked into solar alternatives. Have you guys ever installed like any pergolas or, maybe something on that way they can be at a slightly different angle, or a carport or anything?
Yeah, we absolutely have. We have well over 2,000 installs in Ohio, so we've done a little bit of everything and a lot of things. If that makes any sense, but yeah, we've done pergolas, we've done like carports and things like that. The one thing you do it in, like, obviously we've done a ton of ground mounts, which are just like your ground mounted systems. The thing that you do have to think about when you are doing something like that is that you're not just buying the solar, you're also buying a structure that comes along with it. So it ends up being less cost effective than just installing it on the kind of free mount you already have as your roof. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. That's definitely a good point to help people keep in mind if they are having to look at alternatives, that it might not be, the best alternative for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I know where I mentioned earlier, like just showing like a slideshow that I had. I just wanted to, if you don't mind, if I share my screen for a second, just wanted to kind of show my screen, because I think there are some perceptions, false perceptions that people have about solar, that it's not their fault that they think that solar looks a certain way. It's just that they don't have any personal experience with it, or the personal experience that they do have isn't necessarily reality. So this is kind of like a good example of what solar is not, and what a good residential solar install does not look like, right? You've got panels that are mounted all over the place. You can see, I know somebody, I think it was Elizabeth earlier, mentioned like black on black solar panels. These are obviously not that. So I just typed in, to find this, I just typed in like really ugly solar installs on Google. So this is not what solar looks like. Neither is this, where you have, and this is what solar could look like if you don't work with the right installer, is that, again, you kind of have the probably polycrystalline panels with gray frames, and you have conduit that's like kind of crazy all over the place. And it's kind of good when you're working with your homeowners association, or if it's like a township. This was actually the first install on street facing in the city of Grandview Heights, for those in the Columbus area. But if the house permits, you can run conduit through the attic, so it's not run all over the place like this house here. You can choose to use black on black panels that look sleeker on the roof. This is from an HOA down in Cincinnati, I believe. So you can make some decisions as an installer and as a customer, as a homeowner, to have the system be more aesthetic. And I know what kind of goes along with that, what a lot of HOAs that we've talked to are concerned with is not only what does the install look like today, but what is it going to look like in 5 years? What's it going to look like in 15 years or 20 years? And there's a lot of great solar installers out there. There's a lot of not so great solar installers out there, unfortunately. So if you work with a reputable solar installer and they have a great warranty, that you know that in 10 years and 15 years, the system is under warranty period. So it's not going to fall apart and things like that. You can kind of rest assured as an HOA board member that this is a system that not only is it going to look good today, it's going to look good 25 years down the road as well.
Absolutely. And thank you for reminding me that you had some, screen share stuff for us. I seen on the one that you had mentioned of Senate Bill 289, which was from last year's group. So I'm going to drop the link again up for Senate Bill 61. And that way, if anybody's looking for the latest and greatest from our senators, they've got that very handy for themselves to go read over and peek at and make sure they're using the right number whenever they contact anybody.
Yes, thank you for that. This is an old slide deck that I haven't updated, so I appreciate it.
I do the same thing sometimes because some of them are really handy for other uses. It just, anytime those little numbers change,
Definitely.
those things, we always try to make sure we're referring to the right one so we don't have any confusion. So we had somebody ask us if, and perhaps you might be able to answer this, not of course on behalf of all HOAs, but on yours, if someone failed to ask first and went ahead and just installed solar, do you guys have a process of what happens in that case?
Well, preferably they would check with us beforehand. I mean, if we would see some activity going on, you can be assured that they would be getting a phone call or someone ringing their doorbell or emailing them or something. I mean, worst case scenario, working with our attorneys, there's a possibility they would be forced to return the house to the original condition before solar was installed, which would cost them considerable amount of money. And in our particular association, they would also be responsible for all legal costs that were incurred.
So that's a great example of why it's really important to know that you do belong to a homeowners association if you have those in your housing area, and to make sure that you are applying with them. The application process, even if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, is usually very simple. I mean, in my HOA, it was a single sheet of paper that I had to attach, renderings of what my home looked like now, and then a rendering of what my home would potentially look like with panels. And then I had to provide the name of the company, and it might be a little bit more in depth. They may, require that you, like in Michael's case, go and show up in person for a review board and maybe present your case. But whatever it is, you do want to make sure you go through that process. So we absolutely want to work with our HOAs, not against them, and definitely not have them working against us. Is there ever a case where if they did, maybe not something that drastic, maybe it was something smaller, like they changed their mailbox or something, would you guys automatically, jump it to the lawyer, or would you try to see if there was a way to let it still be allowed?
Oh, I mean, yeah, definitely try to work with the people. But again, we're all volunteers. We don't get paid to be yelled at by people that are unhappy with us.
Right.
And just, when you bought the house, you should have been well aware that it was deed restricted and that you need to follow the restrictions that are in place.
And that's a really great point to always keep in mind. These people are volunteering their time to, help you keep your neighborhood in a better condition than it probably would be if there was just, no one there to help with rules and guidance. And Catherine, she brought up a great point. Um, if if there is an HOA and perhaps the original owners know about that, but then somebody is buying the home, is there like a full disclosure process for that?
There is. So in the listing, assuming that the home is listed in the MLS, there is information in the MLS specifically about the HOA, who the HOA contact person is, what's the name and contact information for that person, what are either the monthly fees or the annually fees, if there are any, any transfer fees. All of those things are disclosed up front. Now, the drawback to that is all of that depends upon whether or not the listing was entered into the system properly, right? So there may, for whatever reason, in very rare occasions, that MLS listing might have the HOA information missing. It shouldn't be. But in the process of underwriting, all of that information is going to come out anyway, whether it was listed as part of the listing or not. So it should be very transparent, very forthcoming. All of these things are things to be considered as a consumer is looking at a home, because it's part of what their budget is monthly. So they need to understand what they're going into upfront. Most
definitely. And I think enough people don't keep in mind that, that is something to budget for, especially in the case where it is a monthly one. That's an additional monthly fee. Some HOAs are yearly. I know ours is an annual fee, but then there are ones that, are a little more frequent than that. So, Michael, we had somebody ask us just a general broad, after they had started with, what was your process like, which you covered really in depth with us. Thank you for doing that. But was it worth it in the end?
It definitely was. As I mentioned, I think the greatest satisfaction for me was kind of opening up solar for the neighborhood and seeing others being able to go solar as well. We had, after our place went solar, there were 2 others fairly soon after that, and there's a third that's going through the process now. And I'm kind of talking to other homeowners about it. So it was an arduous task, but it was worth it in the end. And it was nice to see that we had a lot of support from the neighborhood. I mentioned we had to get 75%. I think we had probably mid-90s% support. So that was very encouraging to see that people really don't have a problem with solar. And, we were talking about the aesthetics and all that with a few of the panelists. And what we worked into our solar guidelines was, if it is visible from the street, it should be black on black. And I think, I don't know how much that helped get our petition signed. Maybe people didn't really care about that, but we tried to make it a reasonable process. And as far as whether panels can go on the front of the house, the way we worded it was, panels, if possible, should be hidden from the street. But if putting them on the back of the house decreases your production, I can't remember the exact numbers at the top of my head. I think we had in there 10 or 20%. If it decreases it by more than that, then you can go ahead and put them on the front. So that basically allows somebody who has a north-facing house, roof faces the street, they're going to be able to do it, because the back of the house isn't gonna. I'm sorry, I should have said, if the north is on the back of the house, they're not going to be forced to put them back there, because that's going to decrease the efficiency enough that our guideline would allow them to put it on the front. So
those are some very reasonable guidelines to have helped get worked into there. So thank you for all that work. I'm sure that was a big task. So one question that we had posed to just kind of everybody was, what advice would you give to someone about how to approach their HOA? So that one seemed like it was a really fitting question for anybody to jump in on. So if anybody has some advice they'd like to give for somebody who's just wanting to start approaching their HOA about it, what would you say?
I guess I can. Oh man, I'll let you go there.
I was just going to say, be nice, be kind. Once again, we're volunteers. And if you start screaming at us, we're going to close the door and walk away.
A great expectation of behavior too. We definitely don't think anybody should be yelled at about, trying to do whatever upgrades they're wanting to do to their home. Nobody else should be, spoken to in anything less than a respectful manner, especially if you're wanting them to do something for you, like approve a permit, or application. So Jake, you had some advice for us?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and May's awesome. Obviously, I think everyone can tell that, but not all HOAs are super responsive. We've had a lot of customers who have submitted HOA applications and haven't heard back for 60 days. So if you find yourself in one of those situations, I would see if you can find anybody in the neighborhood, if any of your neighbors or anyone that's in the same HOA knows anyone who might be on the board, or even knows of somebody who knows of somebody who's on the board. Because a lot of times, if you have kind of like an in, if you will, you can, if maybe you're not always going to get an immediate yes, or maybe you're not even going to get a yes at all, but at least you can get an answer and make some progress. So that is one thing that I will say that I haven't mentioned thus far. Obviously, again, working with the HOA, making sure that everyone's expectations are on the same play. I know Catherine mentioned the real estate reports. Those are awesome when you can show factual evidence that you're not just making things up. These are legitimate things. And obviously, Ohio isn't the most progressive state in the country yet. We're working on it. But, it's groups like this that I think are helping kind of push things forward and catch up to states like New York who just passed that law that a lot of us are very jealous of.
If I can quickly add, I think one thing that can be helpful before you talk to the board is to go around to some of the immediate neighbors that will be the ones that will be seeing your panels, and just talking to them. And if you can get a verbal or even better written statement from them that they're okay with it, they're supportive of it, that can be pretty powerful to show the board that, hey, my immediate neighbors are cool with this. And as Jake and May have said, just having an overall attitude of working with your board as opposed to against them, and just stressing that you as a homeowner, you're interested in maintaining and even improving the property values of the homes. And I think that's often the bottom line for a lot of people. So if they know that you're kind of working towards that that goal and working with them, it can help out a lot.
It looks like Catherine might have a little bit for us.
That's right. I just want to say, I think it helps to be generous with statistical evidence that addresses the HOA's concerns. So we've already addressed one resource. There's more resources out there. The more resources you can provide and address those concerns, the better off you're going to be. I also think it helps to do some education about what solar means for financial freedom for the consumer, right? There are often lots of very smart people on HOAs, and I think that not all of them have necessarily considered what it could necessarily do for them as well. So I think just some education, filling in the blanks. There's always a lot of question marks when these conversations happen. And the hard thing is that those conversations happen in very short periods of time because, as May pointed out, all those people are volunteering, right? They have a finite amount of time to volunteer. So they have to consider these things at a pretty quick pace. And so I think if you come ready with all of the things that they're going to ask about, I think that's going to help your case.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking a moment to answer that just general question about, where we should go first with this. So if we have, those are all the questions that we had submitted ahead of time. So thank you all for taking a moment to, answer those. And if we have any additional questions that any of our attendees this evening would like to ask, we have a few minutes here. We can jump in with any of those additional questions. And if not, we might be giving everybody back about 10 minutes of their evening.
There was a question that you had emailed to me, Mariah,
Yes.
about someone had asked if they're looking for a house that can have solar, should they tell their realtor? That was one of the pre-submitted questions.
Yeah.
The
Sorry,
answer the answer to that is yes. However, the realtor is not necessarily going to be educated on what that means, right? They might not have any kind of understanding of what a solar feasible site looks like. And they also could potentially talk you out of that as well. So just be aware, that there's a wide variety of level of knowledge in that, in the real estate industry. Some people have gone through whole CE courses dedicated specifically to it. I used to teach one. And others really have not addressed the subject before. So just be prepared that there's going to be a wide variety of preparation for the answer to that. You may be on your own in trying to find yourself a solar feasible site. You know what to look for, presumably. If you don't, call a local installer. And I do, though, think that the more the realtor knows that what you're looking for, the better off you're going to have, the better outcome you're going to have.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. If anybody else has a question that I had sent you before that you either didn't cover or we need to cover, please feel free to let us know. I tried to have a little list here and check them off as we were going along. Some of them you guys covered, in different ways, like, whenever you were giving your presentations, what your process had been like, or, if there was any help needed, but if you didn't cover that, or if there's something more you'd like to say on any of those, feel free to shout them out. I tried to send everybody any questions I thought were especially pertinent to them or that somebody had directed specifically toward you, but there was obviously several of them. So if I missed anything, feel free to let us know now. And it looks like our attendees are all pretty quiet and maybe had everything answered. So
I just wanted to throw one last thing in there because I wanted to just emphasize what Catherine just said. If you are a homeowner who is buying or selling a home and you either want solar or you have solar and you're selling your home, make sure that your realtor is familiar and educated on solar. It can make a humongous difference. We had a homeowner last year in Cincinnati that was going to sell their house. They had their first realtor said, no, you can't sell it for anything more with solar. The next realtor said, no, I know what I'm doing. I can help you out here, and end up selling for more than $30,000 difference. So it can make a humongous difference. So if you find yourself in that spot, make sure that the person you're talking to is educated.
So there are some certifications in the real estate world. It's ironically the green certification. I think it's, GRN. But what that means is that person has taken, I think it's an 8 or 10 hour course to get that certification. So they do have a basic understanding, but not all people who are, solar educated necessarily have taken that specific course, I haven't, because I've already got my certification in solar. So I do think it's very important, like Jake said, to arm yourself with the best advocate, and you have to determine who that best advocate is. If you have questions about that, I'm more than happy to, address any of those questions. You're welcome to call me. Depending upon where you are, I may or may not be able to connect you with someone, but here in Central Ohio, I certainly can.
Absolutely. And you can always, email me with Solar United Neighbors, and I can help connect you with any of our wonderful panelists from this evening. Thank you to all of them for, lending us their time and their wonderful knowledge of solar and everything that goes with it within HOAs. And we've got those links up, and we'll make sure that those links are, available. I'll drop a message to some folks that I work with and see if somebody can maybe add those to our HOA page for the Ohio section. And that way, it's readily available information, especially since those pieces can be very handy for anybody to look at and try to go solar with. So, but it looks like we're going to finish up about 5 minutes early here, unless there's any last minute questions. But
well, I just want to also thank you, Mariah. I'm Tristan, by the way, the state director of the Ohio program for Solar United Neighbors, and I think you did a phenomenal job. Thank you for pulling us together. Thank you to all of our panelists, and I'm really hoping that we can continue this conversation in other iterations. This was the 3 of 3 type webinar series. I think this is phenomenal. All 3 of these will be available and they'll live on our website, so folks can reference them. Make sure you refer people to these. I think this is a lot of wonderful content about how folks can engage with their HOAs, and hopefully once we get this Senate bill passed, we'll be working on more education around how that might be enacted and how HOAs and homeowners within those homeowners associations can work together better to make sure that solar is accessible to more folks. And that includes installers and realtors and everybody. So really looking forward to the next stage of this education campaign after that. So I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you, Mariah. And hopefully we'll connect with everybody here soon again.
have a great evening. Hope you have a great weekend. Thank you all for attending.